Wes Peppers, thanks for joining me. I'm glad you're here.
Great to be here, Pastor John, always.
And we've got a lot of ground to cover.
We sure do.
I mentioned you're a pastor and evangelist. You're the evangelism director at It Is Written.
We
you
work
coordinate
together.
all of our mission trips. We're colleagues and friends. Mm-hmm. There's a whole lot more to your story, so let's go back to the beginning just quickly. Where you're from, how'd you get there? How'd you get out of there?
Sure. I was born in Ohio and a number of years ago, and grew up in a non-Christian home. My parents went to church sometimes on occasion. My grandparents went to church quite a bit, and I went with them. But I didn't have a lot of exposure to church or Christianity as a kid.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, I think what we'll start with is the fact that at some stage you're an atheist.
Yes, that's right.
So how do you become an atheist?
You know, I experienced a lot of tragedy in my life. When I was 6 years old, my grandmother actually was killed in a very tragic accident. It was on Thanksgiving Day, and she and my grandfather were going into town, and there was a man behind them who had epilepsy, and he didn't have a driver's license, and he wasn't supposed to be driving, but he borrowed his friend's car to go to the liquor store. And so as he was driving, he actually started having seizures, and that caused him to push the gas pedal all the way to the floor, and he sped up to high speeds and crashed into the back of them. And my grandmother was thrown out of the car and was just tragically killed. She had a friend in the back seat, and she was instantly killed. My grandfather was severely injured. And I remember as a 6-year-old boy, Pastor John, going to my grandmother's funeral and wondering, why would God allow this to happen?
Yeah.
You know, as I got older, my parents divorced when I was in high school, and there was a lot of things like this that led me to atheism. And I just said, you know, if God is real, why would he allow all these things to happen?
High school, you're a football player.
Yes.
Yeah, so you were always going to be a football player. You lucked into that. How'd that come about?
Well, you know, it kind of started because the relationship with my dad growing up was not that strong. And my dad was a big high school football star. And he played football. He was the best on his team. And I thought, one way to get my dad's attention would be to play football. So I started when I was in 6th grade and, you know, just continued on. And by the time I got in high school, I was the biggest, the strongest, the fastest football player on my team. And I worked out really hard, and I did some other things. I took this stuff called Calf Starter, which is, it's like, you know, like a powder for baby calves that it's like artificial colostrum. So I took that stuff and I gained a lot of weight.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Are humans supposed to take that stuff?
No, it's not intended. You know, my football coach told me that when he played college football and he didn't have enough money for steroids, he would take this instead. So I went down to the feed store. You know, I grew up in Alabama. At that time, was living in Alabama, and put $10 on the counter and bought the bag of colostrum. And I used to make these big shakes with peanut butter and about 6 raw eggs and half a gallon of ice cream, vitamin D whole milk, and several scoops of this colostrum. And so between my 9th and 10th grade year over the summer, I gained about 30 pounds.
Oof.
And I was strong. By the time I was a senior, I bench pressed 450 pounds, squatted 700 pounds, and leg pressed 1,800 pounds. So I was big, I was strong. So this was a way to really try to catch my dad's attention. And it did, because, you know, he was kind of reliving his own life through me.
Yeah,
and
as parents do. And he was proud of you. That's my boy.
Of course, yeah.
So how good did you get? Did the colleges come looking?
Certainly. You know, my junior and senior year, I was getting scouted by major universities, and, you know, they were calling me weekly. They would come and watch games and different things. And so I was being heavily recruited, being offered several scholarships and whatnot. So, yeah, I mean, I still actually hold the record for weightlifting in my school.
Really?
And kind of, you know, getting all kinds of awards. And I was, even in my junior year, I was all-state. And
All-state in Alabama.
All-state in Alabama.
Which is a football mad state.
Yep, that's right. Yeah. So my junior year, I was second team All-State offensive line. And my senior year, I was first team All-State.
First team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even with the injury that we'll talk about.
What colleges came looking?
So there was, Alabama, University of Alabama.
They came looking?
Was talking to me, yep. University of Tennessee, Georgia. I got a lot of letters from smaller schools as well. But, I had my heart set on a college not far from our where we lived, about 2 hours away. It was a smaller school. I was being offered things, but I knew that I wasn't probably quite tall enough to play in the full Division I on the offensive line. I was 6 foot. Usually you'd have to be at least 6'3", 6'4". So I was looking at smaller schools, but I was offered a full scholarship until I had an injury. And, it was the fourth game of my senior year, and we were playing our biggest rival of the year. I mean, and we had not beaten them in probably 20 years until my junior year. It was the first time we had beaten them in 2 decades. And so our senior year, it was likely we were going to beat them again. And before the game started, it was just pouring rain for hours and hours. They almost called the game off.
Right.
But eventually it stopped raining just maybe 20 minutes before the game. So, 1 minute into playing, we're all covered in mud. It's nasty. And we were running a particular play, and I was offensive line, so I had to pull and swing out and block these other guys. And the play kind of ended early. Something happened. And as I was slowing down, my foot kind of got suctioned into the mud, and my body kept moving forward, but my foot stayed in the hole. And so I turned and twisted and tore my knee out, and I felt it snap. My coach was about 10 feet away. He said he heard the snap.
Yeah.
And I remember falling on my back and looking up into the sky, thinking to myself, I think I'm done. I think it's over. And so I got up, tried to go back in, play another play, but my knee gave out. I had to come out for the rest of the game. Went next week to UAB, which is one of the best, sports medicine schools in the world.
Sure.
And did a scan, and I remember, Pastor John, I was sitting in the waiting room for the doctor, and at that time I really had no interest in God, but I remember praying this little half-hearted prayer. I said, God, if you care about me, if you're real, if you love me, please let me keep playing football. And I was praying to the God of football, I think, at that time. But the God of heaven heard it. And as soon as I prayed that prayer, the door handle turned, the doctor walks in, and he says, I'm sorry, but you've torn your ACL, you have a lot of meniscus damage, you're going to have surgery as soon as possible, and your season's over. And this was my senior year in high school, the big one, getting recruited. And in fact, the school I wanted to go to sent the scouts, and they said that they told my coach that if I had a great game, which I was having a good game until the injury, that they'd offer me a full scholarship. And so that was kind of devastating to me. So in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, if God is real, let me play football, and then I get the news right after that. So I'm thinking either one, God doesn't exist, or two, he doesn't care about me.
Best thing that ever happened to you, because if you went down that road,
right.
I'm not saying there aren't Christians who play sport, but
Sure.
it's devastating for a kid's spiritual experience.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of compromises you have to make.
That's right.
God isn't your God, that's God. That's just how it is. But at the time, it doesn't feel that way.
That's right.
It feels like the end of the world.
It was a huge disappointment, but little did I know at that time it was the beginning of God's divine appointment for my life.
But you were sliding into atheism.
Yes.
So
yes.
How do you get cemented in atheism? You grew up in a Christian
Yeah.
country, in a family that had some kind
Sure.
of Christianity going on. You're in Alabama, for goodness sake. It's not like you're in skeptical Maine or one of these less churched places.
Sure. Well, there were really several factors. One, it just started putting doubt in my mind when my grandmother was killed.
Right.
Two, when I was in high school, I was on the honor roll. I mean, I made A's and B's. And, there's a text in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 9, says, let not the wise man glory in his wisdom, or the mighty man in his might, or the rich man in his riches, but let him who glories glory in this, that he understands and knows me, God. And so in my previous days, I gloried in all three of those things. My might, obviously, through football, but also my perceived wisdom. And, I made good grades. I was the top of my class. The teachers really liked me. But at the same time, I had a problem in high school. That was I drank a lot. And so my buddies would invite me starting in 9th grade because I was pretty good in football. The seniors would invite me to campouts, and we'd drink and have bonfires and this kind of thing. And it just got worse and worse until I wasn't just doing it on the weekends, but then I was doing it through the week. And eventually I started doing it during school hours. And so I would bring some to school. So that was something that started leading me. Then my senior year in high school, in addition to the injury, my parents got divorced. And my dad started, exiting the scene, and he was involved with other women and different things. And one day I came home and I found my mom laying on the couch. And she was speaking strangely. Her speech was slurred. And so I talked to her, and the more I talked to her, the less sense she made. So I called my dad. Mind you, at this time I'm only 16 years old. My dad comes and he talks to her, and then he's leaving, and he says, "She's sick. I'm going to go get medicine. I'll be right back." Well, he didn't come back. He didn't answer the phone when I called. In fact, he turned his phone off. So finally, I called my grandparents, and they told me to call an ambulance. So when they took her to the hospital, they found out that she had taken 30 sleeping pills.
Wow. And
was trying to end her life. And so I called my dad, finally reached him, and asked him, because I had asked my mother, "Did you tell Dad about this when he came?" And she said yes. So my dad finally confessed that she had told him that, and he had really intentionally left her there to die.
Just left her.
He wanted her to die because every girlfriend he had, she kind of wreaked havoc on that. She would show up at their door. She would, tell them that he was married and all this kind of thing. One lady ended up calling her cops on her, and she ended up in jail. And this kind of thing went on and on. Some of his girlfriends, we had one lady had poisoned our dog, had people come in the middle of the night to our house, fire gunshots in the air, beat on our doors and windows at like 3 a.m.
And you were aware of all of this going on?
Yeah, it was crazy.
You're what, 14, 15, 16 years old?
Yeah, 15, 16 years old.
Well, that's a lot to go through.
The thing is that like I'd had secure parents all my life.
Yeah.
Everything was going well for me on the outside. Was good at football, had good grades, was going to have a good college education and all these things. And then all of a sudden it just kind of all bottomed out at the same time. And so I had everything that the world said you need to be successful, that the world says, we had a good life, money, popularity, all those things. But Pastor John, all of that can change in a minute.
Yeah.
It can change in a second.
And then what have you got?
And what have you got? So with all that tragedy that was happening, I went over to my dad and I said, "Look, I don't ever want to see you again." And I said, "When you die, I'm going to come to your funeral just so that I can spit on your grave." That's what I told him. And so following that, I just kind of wrote everybody off. And I said, I don't need anybody, don't want anybody, don't want to have any connection with my family. I'm going to be successful in life. I'm going to make lots of money, and I'm going to do whatever I please. So all of that tragedy led to that just dismissal of everything. And that's kind of what started leading me to atheism. So I had a class in college that was, of all things, American literature. And we had this big, thick book, and we had assigned reading, but I was a big fan of history, loved history. So I started flipping through that book, and I found a series of letters written between Thomas Jefferson and Thomas Paine.
Paine, the great
great atheist. That's right. So Thomas Jefferson, believed in God, and he had his own issues, but believed in God. And he would write letters to Thomas Paine about all the reasons why he believed the Bible was true, that Jesus existed. And Thomas Paine would write back letters why he didn't think that they were true. All of that was true. And so, I read those, and between what I read and what my experience was in life, my bitter experiences, I just came to the conclusion that there just can't be a God.
Well, you could have sided with Jefferson.
I could have.
But I guess it was those difficult experiences you went through that
That's right.
swung the pendulum the other direction.
Yes. And so, that's what kind of sold me. I think maybe if I hadn't had the experiences, and I think that's true for a lot of atheists.
Sure.
It's not just the evidence that they think they have. It's some perceivable, what seems to be an evidence, but it's more so the experiences they've had.
There's the perceived injustice of God. Oh, he destroyed
Yes.
the world and he killed a
Yes.
bunch of people. There's the hypocrisy of Christians.
That's
that
right.
Other people look at, they go, well, I wouldn't want to be like them anyway, so why would I follow their God? A number of factors that come into it rather than, I would say this, I mean, it's hard to read a person's experience, but I think a lot of atheists aren't honest atheists.
No, I think that's
It's a
right.
way out.
Yep,
you
sure,
know?
sure. And you have perceived science that says, creation story is a myth and whatever, when in fact which we'll get to, there's overwhelming evidence for the validity of the Bible and so
No question.
forth.
Yeah, no question.
So I just basically became a self-proclaimed atheist.
And what did atheism look like for you? How did that affect your life on a day-to-day basis?
For me, it was just the idea of being able to not have to try to make sense of what was happening.
Yeah.
I look into the world, I look into my life is out of control. And, kind of like Solomon wrote in the book of Ecclesiastes when he said, whatever I wanted to do, I did it, in chapter 1 there. I did not withhold myself from anything. And that was also kind of a justification for me to do the same. I just wanted to be able to do whatever I wanted to do, and so I did. So, in high school I had drank, and thankfully for a season, I stopped drinking because my football coach saw what was happening. He sat me down. He said, look, you have an opportunity here to do something that no one's ever done from our high school, which is have a college football scholarship. Even after my injury, I still played college football and had a scholarship to a smaller school. But he said, you need to step up and be a man. And I was thankful for that because at that time of my life, I didn't have anybody to just grab me by the collar and say, shape up, man.
Yeah.
Shape up, boy, and grow into a man. And so I did. And I put that away, and that's when I really excelled in football and so forth. But after high school, when I was in college, and this was actually a year after I started playing college football, that I ended up started drinking again. So we can talk about that maybe a little bit more.
So just quick, when you went to college, that fueled your atheism, the things you learned there.
Yes.
Yeah, drove you in that direction.
Yes.
Yeah.
It did. It really did. Those things that I was reading. Plus, I changed my major over to earth science, which really ultimately, I took all the classes in evolution and so forth. So that really convinced me.
Well, somehow you came back. We want to hear in a moment how you came from atheism to Christianity. Another couple of things we want to get to as well. He's Wes Peppers, I'm John Bradshaw. This is our conversation brought to you by It Is Written. Thank you for remembering that It Is Written exists because of the kindness of people just like you. To support this international life-changing ministry, please call us now at 800-253-3000. You can send your tax-deductible gift to the address on your screen, or you can visit us online at itiswritten.com. Thank you for your prayers and your financial support. Our number again is 800-253-3000, or you can visit us online at itiswritten.com. We left off, you're at college studying earth sciences, evolution, and all of that. But at some stage, Wes, you made the journey back, or what can't really say back, but out of atheism to Christianity. Ultimately, became a pastor and an evangelist and a teacher of pastors and evangelists and an administrator and a whole lot of stuff. When did the sunshine begin to pierce the dark clouds of atheism?
Sure. So, I had been an atheist. I played 2 years of college football and quit. And really, all the things that I did, I was drinking, I was, engaged in a lot of things that I shouldn't. And just nothing would satisfy me.
Why did you quit college football?
I quit just because, my other knee started having the same tendencies as the first one did when I tore it. It just wasn't as fun. There wasn't that camaraderie that I had with my high school friends.
Sure.
It was just brutal, honestly. I mean, practices 3 times a day in the summer, and I was a long way from home. My mom was needing me to come back, and there were just a lot of factors. But truly, I just didn't feel satisfied with it. It wasn't filling the hole in my heart.
That's right.
So, I reached this place after I came home. I quit college football, came home, going to college still, and my life was really out of control. I was depressed. I had a lot of darkness in my life. I had, pornography issues. I had drinking issues. I had, anything just about you can name. I was having it. I was addicted to video games. I played a video game once for 3 days and 2 nights without sleeping.
No way.
And so my life was out of control in every way. And plus still carrying the pain from my parents and so forth. So I reached the place where I thought to myself, if this is what life is really all about, you do all this stuff and it doesn't fill you, it doesn't give you joy, it doesn't give you peace, it might give you some temporary happiness, then what's the point of living? And I thought to myself, I'm probably just going to commit suicide because there's no point in living. So there was really one thing that kept me from doing it the same day, and that was I wanted my family to feel the weight and responsibility for my death. I wanted them to carry the guilt that I had in my own life, especially my dad. I wanted him to suffer because of that. So I'm sitting and I'm thinking to myself, how can I do this in a way that, would carry that through? Now, ironically, it was odd because, I say odd, but it was divine appointment.
Sure.
That at the same time I was thinking, how can I do this? I had a growing thought in my mind, why don't you study the Bible? It wasn't a voice, it was just a thought that I just couldn't seem to shake. And the first time I thought this, I thought, well, why would I study the Bible? I don't believe in the Bible. It's a fairy tale, it's a myth, God's not real, etc., etc. But I just couldn't shake it. And so my uncle was really the only Christian in my family. And I had told him several times, he himself had come from a really rough background, accepted Christ. He went to a Bible prophecy seminar similar to the ones that we do around the world.
Yeah.
And he gave his life to Christ through that. And he was just a changed man. And he had tried to give me things at different times and I had no interest at all. But finally, I decided that I would study the Bible to prove it false. So I said, hey, I'll study the Bible. I'm going to prove it's false. It's a fairy tale. There's no God. And then I'll commit suicide. There's no purpose or meaning to life whatsoever. Well, at the same time I made that agreement, he gave me a set of Bible study guides. And he said, I know you told me not to give you anything anymore, but I just really feel impressed that I should do this. And I looked at him kind of funny and I thought, that's odd. But I took them, went to my college apartment. I was 22 years old. And I opened this old dusty Bible that my grandmother had given me and those lessons. And it was amazing because as I studied the Bible, I studied Bible prophecy and came to the conclusion that the Bible had to be true. There was no way to explain the events that have happened in the world through history. The Bible wrote about it thousands of years before it happened.
Briefly, what are you referring to? So you're saying you read the Bible, there's no doubt you looked at history. What events?
Sure. So Daniel chapter 2 was one of the first things. Okay. And starting in ancient times, the Bible predicted the major world empires down through the ages until it comes to our day.
Yep.
Absolutely convincing.
Yeah, pretty hard to explain that away somehow, right?
Yeah. And you have to know I was a super skeptic. Like, you had to give me hardcore evidence. So I was at State University at the time studying science. So I go to the library on campus and I'm pulling out these history books. Is this stuff real? Is this true? In those days, you couldn't just look it up on Google. It wasn't that easy, you know?
Right.
But I'm looking it up, and sure enough, it was true. I studied Daniel chapter 7, where the same thing is repeated again. Prophecies from the book of Revelation, Revelation 13, where it reveals the United States in Bible prophecy. All these things. Matthew chapter 24, where it talks about the events happening in the final moments of the world. And all of it was just perfectly true. And so the more I studied, the more I became convinced that the Bible was true.
Now, when you were learning the Bible was true, were you thinking, oh, how wonderful? Or were you thinking, oh, no?
Oh, no, I was thinking, why hasn't anyone ever told me these things? I was excited because yeah, absolutely.
But even though you're going to have to fall on your sword and admit that atheism didn't work.
Well, you know, I was looking for purpose.
Yeah.
I was looking for something to grab hold of. And I thought to myself, man, if there really is a God, then, you know, he has to care about us. You know, he created us, and there has to be an explanation for the bad things happening in the world.
Right.
And it was about the same time I studied about the Great Controversy, the understanding of why there's evil if God is good, and it all made sense to me. And so I recognized that God was beginning to draw me. Now I went to my college professors. Now these guys are hardcore atheists.
Sure.
I mean, they are, like, I was in classes where they would mock the Christians in the room.
Wow.
They would make jokes in the middle of class about Christianity. And, you know, I remember distinctly one of my professors would come in drunk about half the time. Every other day he'd come in drunk, and he would be up there trying to teach, slurring his speech. And I'm thinking to myself, man, that doesn't really look like a life that I want to live.
Right.
He had no hope. He had a divorce and different things. And so I went to some of my professors and I said, look, I want you to see what I'm finding here. And they graciously listened to me, and I carried them through, like Daniel chapter 2, some of the simpler prophecies. And I said, all this was written thousands of years before it happened, but it happened just like it said. I said, how do you explain this?
What'd they say?
They didn't say anything.
Really?
They looked at me with a blank look on their face. And it was almost like when, you know, the handwriting on the wall in the book of Daniel, like the color drained from their face, literally. And they looked convicted, but of course they didn't want to admit. And finally they just mustered up to say, we don't have time to talk to you about this. And that was it.
And that was pretty compelling for you.
It was compelling to me. And I thought to myself, if they don't have an answer for me, you know, then it has to be true.
Right.
And history confirmed it.
Look, there is no answer. Daniel chapter 2 with the rise and fall of the kingdoms, and
That's
Daniel
right.
7 where that's repeated and enlarged upon, and then even later where you have the same scenario outlined and into Revelation
Yes.
13. Look, how in the world do you explain that away?
You just can't. You
No,
really can't.
I'd love for someone, I don't want to be unkind, and I know there are many genuine atheists, but it's intellectually dishonest.
That's right.
To look at that and then just dismiss it as though somehow it's not real.
Many atheists have been made believers because of these prophecies, because there's literally no other explanation.
That's right, there isn't one.
You know, another thing that I started studying was biblical archaeology.
Oh yeah?
And just learning about the Rosetta Stone and the Cyrus Cylinder and a number of archaeological finds that confirmed the historicity of the Bible. It was fascinating to me. And so I came to a point, you know, I'm just kind of going along, enjoying it, being convinced of it. But then God struck me one day with a thought that you need to decide. Are you going to follow this or not? And you know, I was believing it more and more, but I just hadn't made a full conscientious decision that I believed it. So I was kind of at a crossroads, and I just said to myself, how can I deny it? It's true.
Right.
So I made the choice to believe that the Bible was true. Had not yet really encountered Christ fully and made a decision for Him, but I reached the point where I could confidently choose to believe that the Bible was true. So not long after that, I started reading the Gospels.
Yep.
So I'm reading through the Gospel of John, and I'm seeing the life of Jesus, and I'm thinking, what beauty, what purity, what goodness is the life of Jesus. And He's unlike any person that has ever lived. And You know, he's claiming to be the Son of God. And I thought to myself, as has been said before, but he was either crazy,
Yep.
he was either a liar,
Or
he truly was who he said he was, the
Right.
Son of God.
Yeah.
And I believed that. I said, there's just no way out of this. And so as I looked at the life of Christ, and I looked at my life, my life was a mess. I was depressed, I was addicted, I had all these issues in my life, and I thought, how would God ever accept me? How could he ever receive me? My life is just a disaster. God could never forgive sins like this. I had taken advantage of people, all kinds of things, just nasty stuff. And I came across a Bible verse, John chapter 6, verse 37 and 38, where Jesus said, all that the Father has given to me will come to me, and the one who comes to me I will never cast away.
Isn't that something?
And that verse just struck my heart.
Beautiful.
And I thought to myself, truly, either God has to accept me because of his goodness and because he promised, or it really is all a sham.
Yeah.
And I just believed that God would accept me because of the righteousness of Christ. And so I was 22 years old, and when I came to that verse, I knelt down on my college apartment bedroom floor, and I said, Lord, if you're willing to receive me, I'm willing to choose you. And Pastor John, there wasn't an angel that appeared or a light that flashed, but I could sense the presence of God.
Sure.
And he changed my heart that day. And I knew that I was a different person. And the weight came off, this weight of sin. I had a peace that I'd never known before, and my life was different. And all those addictions just lost power.
Really?
Never drank again, never smoked or chewed again. Just gave it up, and it was all for the Lord, And really, what was I giving up? I was giving up things that were destroying my life.
Yeah, sure.
There was really no loss. It was a gain to give them up.
Yeah.
And God just began changing me. So at that time of my life, I had just a few classes. I was towards the end of my degree. I had maybe a year left in college. And so I had a lot of time on my hands. Wasn't working either. I was just going to school. And I had worked previously and saved enough money that it carried me all the way through. And so I would spend, and I didn't know this, that going to bed early is better for you than going to bed late. I had not read about that. I had no knowledge of that. But I'd find myself going to bed sometimes 7:30 in the evening, 8 o'clock, 8:30. A college student. I wasn't going to the bars anymore, so I didn't need to stay up late. And I would wake up 2, 3, 4 in the morning, and I would spend hours reading the Bible. I probably, in the first year of accepting Jesus, read the New Testament about 15 times.
Nice.
Read the Old Testament 2 or 3 times, and just couldn't get enough. Spend hours praying, and I saw miracles happen. I mean, like my sister had a Mustang, and I prayed for her every day, and she drove that thing, and she got into a wreck, and she flipped it upside down. It skidded down the road, hit a telephone pole. She walked away unscathed. I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah.
I would see things like that happening, and the Lord was just close. I mean, he was just very close. And my life wasn't perfect. I still was growing, and
Sure.
I wasn't just completely, like Jesus.
But it's very early in the game, and you've got to grow. It takes time.
I was growing, but those first 2 years that I spent with God were just really precious. I just had hours and hours to spend with him, and it was a rich experience.
Question for you. There was an impression I ought to read the Bible.
Yes.
And you twisted that. Oh, I'll read it to prove it wrong. That's all fine. I'm happy when people do that. When they come at that attitude, because often they came to the same conclusion as you. Where'd that impression come from?
Oh, no doubt. For me, it was coming from God. At that time, I didn't know that.
But was somebody praying for you? I mean,
I believe there was. It's interesting because when my uncle went to that seminar years ago, there was a little old lady that was in the church, and she I went with my uncle to some of those meetings.
Oh, you did?
I was maybe 12 years old at the time.
Interesting.
And it had an impact on me.
No doubt.
It had an impact on me, but I probably went to church maybe for 2 or 3 months. But there was this little old lady in the church, and she really liked me. Her name was Miss Bertha, and she hugged me anytime she'd see me, and she'd send me, Pastor John, a birthday card every year.
Really?
No matter where I moved to, somehow she'd get my new address.
It was her.
She'd send me. And she was praying for me. I think,
she was.
of course, my aunt and uncle were praying for me.
Yeah.
And, there weren't a lot of Christians in my family, but somebody was praying for sure.
Yeah.
And that just, I believe God used that.
The power of prayer.
Power of prayer.
Well, I tell you, we
absolutely.
should be praying for the lost and for the atheists
Absolutely.
and for the young people who are experimenting with life.
Yes.
Huh?
That's right.
And God will speak. He still speaks to
Pray
young
for
people.
our children, yes.
Still speaks to atheists. You ended up somehow angling into ministry.
Yes.
Need a short story how that
Sure.
happened.
Yeah, I was in my senior year in college, and the people, even my college classmates who were not religious, they would say, you've changed a lot. You're different. And I would care about them. I cared about them. I would try to help them. And even they would say, you should probably be a pastor or something.
Oh, really?
And I was going to church, and I was, unbeknownst to me, I was kind of giving Bible studies to the members. They would ask me about what I've been learning, and I would almost be preaching to them. And so many people said, "Oh, you should think about the ministry." So, I was in the last year of my college degree, getting a Bachelor of Science, and I almost considered quitting college, but God impressed me to stay and finish. And then I found a little Bible college, a shorter one, that I went to after college, and that was the beginning of my time in ministry.
Yeah, and from there, the Lord's been leading you a step at a time.
Yes.
Step at a time.
So, I was a Bible worker and a pastor and evangelist, and just worked in different things through the years.
One day we're going to have to talk about ministry stories.
Yes, that would be awesome.
We could look at that from 1,000 different angles.
Absolutely.
Now, you're in ministry, and things are going swimmingly. By now, you've found a lovely wife, and life is happy, and
Yes.
so forth. And then you get some devastating news.
Got some devastating news, yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, I noticed I had some issues going on internally, and went to the doctor. He misdiagnosed me.
Oh.
And those issues got worse. So finally, the Lord worked a series of miracles, but I got into the right doctor and found out I had cancer.
How old were you?
I was 28 at the time.
What's it like to be 28 and be told that, look, no matter what kind of cancer, right? If it's the C word, you could die.
Yeah.
That's what is impressed upon you. That's what you start to think. What's it like to think that at 28 with a wife?
I had given my life to God. I was working for God. Literally at that time was doing work all around the world, seeing thousands of people come to Christ. And I'm thinking, why would this happen? It's that natural question, why?
Sure.
And little did I know that through this, God would teach me a lot and would open up avenues to minister to people that I never even dreamed of.
Okay, let's talk more about that in just a moment. A young man, 28 years old, has cancer and is staring at a potential death sentence. We'll find out more in a second. He's Wes Peppers. I'm John Bradshaw. This is our conversation brought to you by It Is Written. You know that at It Is Written, we are serious about the study of the Word of God, and we encourage you to be serious about God's Word also. Well, I want to share with you another way that you can dig deeper into the Word of God, and here it is. itiswritten.study. Go online to itiswritten.study and you can access the It Is Written Bible Study Guides, 25 in-depth Bible studies that will walk you through the Bible. It's going to be good for you, and it's the sort of thing that you will want to tell somebody else about so that they can dig deeper into the Word of God and come to know the things of the Bible intimately. As you get into the It Is Written online Bible study guides, you'll understand the prophecies of the Bible, the plan of salvation, and more. So don't forget, itiswritten.study. Itiswritten.study. A moment ago, Wes, you told me you're a young man, not even 30, you find out you have cancer. How did things look at the beginning? Was this a death sentence? Was this you're going to have a rough time? I mean, what was the prognosis, I think is what I'm asking.
Well, the cancer I had was very treatable if it was treated.
Good.
If not treated, it was very deadly. It was a very rapid moving cancer that would kill you within months if you didn't get treatment. So they told me, you have nothing to worry about. This is a common cancer for young men your age, and it's, we're going to go in and do a surgery, and we think you'll be good to go. So I had the surgery and ended up coming out of that, and they said, actually, the cancer has spread to up into your lymph nodes of your abdomen and lungs, which was common for that cancer. The same cancer that Lance Armstrong had.
Yep.
And he, made a full recovery.
Yeah, his went to his brain.
His went all the way to his brain, and he still recovered.
Yeah.
So they said, so you're going to need some chemotherapy. And I said, okay. They said, but don't worry, people your age handle it very well, etc. Well,
Bounce back.
Yeah. So I got my first treatment. It was inpatient for 5 days. I got out, and they said, do whatever you feel like doing. It's just, don't get around sick people.
Okay, how was the chemo? Was it rough?
In the beginning it wasn't, but as it accumulates in your system, it gets worse and worse with every treatment. So the first treatment, I thought, I don't know what people complain about. This is easy, Yeah. So I went back the next day after my treatment, and I taught classes. At that time, I was teaching at the Bible college, and so I was teaching classes, and then about halfway through the classes, I started not feeling so well. So I ended up finishing teaching the class sitting in a chair. I'm stubborn. I want to finish my class. I went up to my office and was sitting at my desk, and I just felt worse and worse. My legs started getting tight and sore and stiff. I felt very sleepy, and I laid my head on my desk for 2 hours. And I told my colleague, I'm going to go home now. I lived about 12 minutes away. And so I'm driving, and I literally don't know how I got home. I think God had to send an angel to steer my car. I do not remember that. As soon as I walked into the house, I almost fell down the stairs because I was starting to black out. I called my doctor, told him my symptoms. He said, you need to go to the ER right now. He said, don't delay. And so my wife was working, and she worked about 30 minutes away. And I said, hey, he told me to go to the ER. She said, well, I have about 30 more minutes of work. I'll finish that, then I'll drive home and I'll take you. So it was over an hour before we're on our way to the hospital. I'm just getting worse. When I check into the hospital, my blood pressure was 55/27. I was almost dead. Wow. And it was continuing to decrease. I had 104 temperature. My heart rate was over 180. And they did blood work, and my white blood cell count was 0.2, which it's supposed to be at least 5.
You have no immune system.
I had no immune system. So what had happened was I went septic. I had a septic infection, and it was just, I was dying. I was literally dying. So they took me all the way up to put me in reverse isolation ICU, which means that the doctors and nurses had to wear a mask and all that. And they put 2 IVs in and a central line in my neck, and they flooded my body with fluids. So, the solution to pollution is dilution, right? So they were trying to dilute that out. And so I literally gained probably 30 pounds of fluid overnight. I mean, I was just swollen. And for the first night, my blood pressure just kept trying to dive, my body trying to shut down. And they kept me alive. They gave me medication and so forth, but I wasn't improving. And it was interesting because my students at that time, they came down after a couple of days, and they had prayer. They walked around the hospital and prayed and asked the Lord to intervene. And it was interesting because they prayed that evening, and the next morning I woke up and I had this massive pocket that had formed on my hip. It was the infection. And I looked at that, and it looked like something from a sci-fi movie, just weird.
Yeah.
And I said to the nurse, you might want to look at this. And she said, oh, it's just the fluid. Don't worry about it. And I said, no, I really think you ought to look. And when she came over, her eyes got big. She called the charge nurse. She was shocked. They called the doctor. He was shocked. And they took me straight away down to surgery, lanced it and drained it. And the problem was, because my white blood cell count was so low, they weren't able to track and know what type of antibiotics to give. Well, when they lanced that, they were able to do labs on it, and then they gave me the right antibiotics, and I began to improve immediately.
Wow, so that was God's doing, wasn't it?
It was God's doing. And, I'm thankful for modern medicine as well,
Oh, sure.
because without that, it would have been challenging. But I believe it was the prayer. There were literally, Pastor John, thousands of people all around the world praying for me. My wife posted on Facebook, and people praying everywhere. And I believe all that prayer led God to move in that way and saw immediate improvement. Prior to that, I was literally, I couldn't move my legs. I could not even lift them 1 inch off the bed. My lungs filled with fluid. I got pneumonia. I was literally at death.
And there's a wife,
yes,
in her 20s,
yes,
been married for a few years,
right,
and she's sitting in a waiting room or wherever, realizing that although God is good, she could be burying her young husband any day.
that's right.
What a thing to go through.
And here's a husband looking at a wife saying, I don't want some other guy coming along to marry her, right? Now, this was interesting because before the students prayed, I was laying in the bed, and I woke up at about 3 a.m. And it was the strangest sense that literally my life was hanging by a thread. I was hovering between life and death.
And you were aware of that.
And I was aware of it. I could just tell that my life could end at any minute. And I prayed to God, and I said, God, I don't know what your plan is, but if it's your plan for me to die, I want to know that I'm ready. And I want to know that my life is surrendered to you. But if it's your will for me to live or die, let it be for your glory in any capacity. And I sensed his presence again. I could just sense a peace that came to my heart. And it's interesting, and the Lord just worked in different ways. I had a nurse that, in the middle of the night, when you're in ICU, they check your vitals like every 5 or 10 minutes. It's just constant. And when you weren't breathing enough, the oxygen beeper would go off. So she would come in and she would say, the beeping would be happening. She'd say, Mr. Peppers, you need to take more breaths, and the beeping will stop. And finally, I kind of got a little bit, I'm not sleeping, I'm not well, got a little bit irritated. And she said, if you'll breathe, the beeping will stop. And I said, ma'am, I'm breathing the best that I can. You can turn that thing off or whatever. I need to sleep. And when she I saw her just kind of pause, and I could see I had inflicted a bit of a wound. And the Lord spoke to me, and he said, you would treat this woman this way, and I'm using her to save your life.
Save your life, yeah.
And the Lord said, you need to apologize to her. And I said, I will, Lord, I will. Maybe tomorrow, Right now, I just need to sleep. The Lord's like, no, you need to do it now. She comes away, and she's going to leave the room. When she goes to the door won't open.
Oh, how about that?
It won't open.
Really?
And she's trying to, it's like it's locked from the inside. And she's sitting there working it, and it won't open. And the Lord said, you need to do it. And I said, ma'am, I just want you to know I'm sorry that I got a little bit iffy with you. And I said, I want you to know I believe that God is using you to save me. And she turned around, she had tears in her eyes. And she said, thank you. And I don't know what was happening in her life, but she said, you don't know how much I needed to hear that.
Well.
And she said, so I'm thankful for that. And then she turned and the door opened like it was brand new. Now here's the lesson I learned from that. Sometimes, Pastor John, the smallest things in our life that irritate us or frustrate us or disappoint us, or we consider it an annoyance or a burden, are the very thing that's saving us, that's changing our life, changing our heart. And God allows those things in our lives to refine us, to grow us, to strengthen us. So that was a really unique thing that happened.
How about these medical people saving people's lives?
Yes.
I mean,
grateful
everybody's
for
work
them.
is important.
Yes.
Everybody's work is important, and
Sure.
there's dignity in all work, and there's value in all work. But how about these people who are in your room at 3 a.m?
Absolutely.
They're away from their family. Of course, they're getting paid to be there, but that's not the
Sure.
point I'm looking at. Nurses and doctors and nurse techs and all the others, heroes.
Absolutely heroes. And they're sacrificing a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't imagine having to stay up all night working. And then, we're not designed to be up at night.
That's
and
right.
They're working out day after day. And
You're dealing with anxious people, and some of
Yeah.
them are crotchety people, and
Yeah.
most of them don't apologize.
yeah.
And it can be
That's
really a
right.
challenge.
But God is using them, and
Yes, he is.
and they see miracles all the time.
All the time.
My case became well known, and the doctors knew that the students had come and prayed,
Wow.
and that something happened very unusual the next day. And they actually wrote a story about it and put it in the hospital newsletter.
Did they?
They did. And it was really something, because the doctors and nurses started coming to me about their life. They said, I have marital issues, or I have this problem, or I have this decision to make, and I don't know what to do. What would you tell me? What do you think God would want me to do? And so I had a huge opportunity to start witnessing to people.
Fantastic.
And sharing my faith. And I remember once there was I had different roommates, because I was in and out of the hospital for months, There was one man that had come in, and we chatted a little bit, and I asked him, he was in there he had kidney cancer, and I think it had bled over into his pancreas, and he was going to die within weeks. And I heard his story, and he said, well, tell me about you. And I said, well, I'm a Christian pastor, and this was my life. I shared my testimony with him, and he just got real quiet. He said, I used to go to church. He said, my wife and I used to attend the same church that I attended, actually.
Oh, really?
It was the same church, amazingly. And he said they used to have this Christmas thing every year, a big drive-through scene, live nativity. And he said, do they still do that? I said, yeah, they still do that. He said, for 2 years, in that nativity, I was the voice of God.
You're
I
kidding.
played the voice. No.
Really?
And he said, I went with my wife. He said, but she died and I strayed away. And he said, and I haven't been to church in years, and I don't even know if I know God anymore.
This is God calling him back, wasn't
This
it?
was God. And I said, friend, I said, brother, I said, I believe God wants you back. He wants your heart again. And I said, is there anything that would prevent you from giving your heart back to God right now? And he said, he just got quiet for maybe 30 seconds. And he said, no, I don't think so. I said, would you like to make that choice? And he said, yes. I said, let's pray. So here I am, recovering from cancer. Here he is, literally dying from cancer. We prayed together, and he said, brother, I have peace that I haven't had in years. And he was led back to Christ and probably died within a month. So God just kept putting me in these scenarios. And not only then, but since then, I've been able to share that testimony with thousands of people, give them encouragement and hope. And I'll tell you, it wasn't easy. I went through rough patches, man. I was at home throwing up, puking my guts out, just nasty experiences that I had to go through. But God brought me through it all, and I'm thankful for that.
I'm thankful too.
Yeah, amen.
Yeah, I'm thankful too.
Amen.
So today you're full on in ministry,
Yes.
directing evangelism at It Is Written, organizing large-scale events that call people to faith in Jesus,
Yes.
organizing mission trips.
That's very exciting.
Tell me, we've only got about 2 minutes, but
Sure.
What fires you up about what you do? You know, this hands-on ministry, not just doing it yourself, but encouraging others to get involved.
Sure.
What fires you up?
You know, when I first came to Jesus and I accepted him, immediately I felt in my heart, I've got to tell other people. I've got to tell other people. So I used to start inviting college students to my apartment. I'd feed them a poor college student's lunch, you know, spaghetti or whatever. And then I'd tell them about God. I'd give them Bible studies. And a lot of them, you know, were not real. But then I got some training. I learned how to do it better. And, you know, I went from giving 4-hour Bible studies to a 1-hour Bible study. You know, I learned a lot. But I just had this fire, this desire to tell others. And that has never left me. So Pastor John, you know this is true because we do the same work. But when you're preaching or you're giving a Bible study, you're sharing your faith, and you see another person, you see just that twinkle in their eye.
You see the lights go on.
You see the light come on, and God speaks to their heart, and they begin to accept Christ and accept truth, and it changes them. That's the best sense of anything you can experience on the earth. And you just can't get enough of it. So I've had this burden ever since, and now God's given me the opportunity to do it around the world, and it's really a blessing.
And someone with that same burden, I want to tell Jesus, I don't know where to begin. What do you recommend to them?
You know, I begin with your neighbors. You know, begin with those around you, your coworkers, your family, your friends. Give them some literature. Share your testimony with them. Offer them Bible studies. It's really not that hard. You'll reach out to people in kindness to seek to do them good, and it'll open their hearts. It'll open them to you, and then God can use you to do greater things.
Hey, thanks for sharing. I wish we had more time.
Sure.
Maybe we'll fill in some of the gaps at another time.
Absolutely.
What's undeniable is that God has been at work.
That's right.
The God of heaven who's spoken it was done, reached all the way down, touched your life, orchestrated circumstances to bring you to faith in him.
That's right.
God is good, isn't he?
He's very good and still working every day on me.
Amen. And thanks for sharing, Wes.
Thank you,
appreciate
Pastor John.
And thank you for being with us. It's been fun. I appreciate you checking in, and I hope you've been encouraged and blessed. He is Wes Peppers. I'm John Bradshaw. This has been our conversation.